Faith, well, born and raised Catholic. I'm actually a very good practicing Catholic. I go to Mass Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays.
I got 3 daughters. Jordan, my oldest, Callie, my middle daughter, and Cameron, my youngest. My wife, Lisa, who's been around the derbies with us since I started.
She hates it.
She hates it, is right.
Well, between the two of you, what's your oldest memory of Demolition Derby? Like when you're 4 or 5 or whatever you can think of.
Well, my oldest memory is 12 years old. Our dad doing it and pulling the car by chain about 30 miles to the track, and me sitting in the car pushing the brake every stop behind the pickup truck. Talking late 1977.
He had a bunch of buddies that he derbied with. Some old timers. They're gone now. Bill Galvin, Bill Wehagen, John Mihalik. Had to be 7, 8. After the derby, we'd go into the pits because we weren't allowed in the pits as kids. And they just used to leave the cars in the pits
You could do that.
to be picked up by scrapyard or something the next day.
Yeah.
So
All right.
we would get in the car, someone would get in the car, and there would be
You didn't want to Edgewood?
4 guys, 4 kids or whatever pushing, and you would push it in to one of the other cars.
Nice.
So that was our version of derbying at, 7, 8 years old.
No,
You were first.
Vic
You
was.
did the year before. Oh, yeah.
My brother was, then me, then Steven, then Todd.
Who do you think's
That
got the
was-
most wins?
Who got the most?
Out of 3 sitting here, who's got the most wins?
Just turn the camera around, you'll see. Go that way with it. There's about 40 missing that I gave the
Yeah, me
kids over the
too.
years.
Go over that way. They're over there.
Hi, I'm Damon Clark, and I grew up in Stoneboro, Pennsylvania. A 76 Impala we're building over here for Jason Sauer. It's a big art project, covered in stickers, covered in fancy stuff, trying to build one of the coolest street art projects in the world.
I love it. What does faith, family, and tradition of Derby car mean to you?
So faith, is rooted in God, obviously, and Demolition Derby. I'll start with, that all kind of ties together, faith, family, and tradition. The first Demolition Derby I ever went to, I was 5 years old, and my mother took me to see my Uncle Elmer Smith, my Uncle Casey Smith, and my cousin Randi Brasil derby at Stoneboro, Pennsylvania. And our family's very rooted in faith. We believe in God and we believe in family, and that's what drives the Demolition Derby family that we have today. So it's been a tradition in our family for a few generations now, and we've all built and ran Demolition Derby cars for as long as I can remember. That's what faith, family, and tradition mean to me.
Thank you.
Hey, Josh Decker, all the way out from Whitney Point, New York. Telling a little bit of a story from what really one of my greatest memories of derbying is when I was a kid. I used to go to our county fair. I loved it so much. I was nuts the whole day of the fair. I just couldn't wait to get there. And I'll never forget that finally my dad got to work with the fair board next to the track. And my dad said, Josh, you want to stand next to the track with me? It was such a dream for me. There was a man there that had been running forever. His name is Harold Benjamin. We call him Old Man Benjamin. He still derbies to this, and I think he's 76 years old. Well, at this time he was in his 60s, and we were calling him that. Well, I'll never forget it. From you to me away, he made a hit, and his face went off the steering wheel with his open face helmet, and his nose just starts gushing blood. And remember, this is an older man. I'll never forget, he reaches over, grabs a rag that he had, a red rag. He puts it on his nose. He was driving an Imperial with push button, shifter. He pushed the button, and here he goes. He starts derbying. He derbied the whole time with this rag, blood all over his face, and he won the derby. And I never forgot being that close, saying, like, this is the coolest guy I ever seen in my life. Most guys would quit or give up. This man didn't. He kept going, and he won. And for me, that was like one of my oldest memories, but like, I love Demolition Derby. Something about that like really hooked me to the sport. And another real quick one I have was maybe a few years after that. I must have been about 14 or 15, right before I was going to start running. Another icon by the name of Jesse Howe, and he passed away a few years ago, so I really want to tell this story. He was an icon in our area. and he was driving an Imperial, and they have these weird oval steering wheels. They're really ugly, and he's out there just junking people left and right, just junking. He backs up, and his steering wheel comes out in his hand. He's holding it, and he holds it kind of up. I'll never forget looking at him. He chucked it. He chucked it out of the car. He put his hands like this, and same thing with the push button, starts going. And he was derbying with no steering at all, and he won the derby. I know you're going to say, like, Josh, you're telling crazy stories. These are why they're icons. Harold Benjamin and Jesse Howe are the real people that got me into the sport and made me realize, like, there are real badasses. And maybe I could be one of them. So kind of some cool stories from way back in the 80s and the 90s, but that's what got hooked me to Demolition Derby. Thanks for letting me be on, Jason.
Hello, my name is Mark Sturgill Sr. I am the owner of Crash Bash Demolition Derby Gear. I'm from Hamilton, Ohio. And the story I was telling you was I've got a good friend named Ron Barker, Derby number 64 from Hamilton, Ohio. Everybody called him the Sandbagger. He would, this was back in 90s, so he was about 50, 55 years old then. He would always take his car, put it in a corner, and just tap people until it got down to 5, 6 cars, and then he would start putting on a show for everybody. And he's won a lot of derbies, and people always called him the Sandbagger. He'd probably be my first person I knew that was a sandbagger, but he wasn't. He was very intelligent. He knew how to drive his car and how to use his car to get the trophy. And, you know, because like I tell my son, you have to use your head, not your foot. But when it comes down to using your foot, you got to give it your all. And there's a lot of drivers out there. I'm from Butler County, Ohio. We got the Isaac family. They're a good tradition. We got Larry Fields, a lot of big guys down there, and they always go out of state, out of town, out of county, and they always bring back the money. You know, there was a lot of feuding going on, but when it come down to taking the money home, the guys would buckle down, hit the cars, take them out, and then they would work on themselves. And you know, a lot of tradition. You know, who's going to win this derby? And it wasn't so much sandbagging as picking on the car that you knew you could take out with another guy. And it's amazing. That's how the derby traditions get together. You get feuds, but at the end of the day, everybody's shaking hands and looking for the next build, next derby. And you know, it's just awesome to be able to watch a driver that you know's good, watch how he drives, how he uses his car. Another person I really enjoy watching is the Siopas. I've been watching it probably the last 5 to 10 years. The guys will go out there, there'll be 2 or 3 of them, and they'll take on 15 guys, literally. And a lot of times they get beat, but they put a lot of hurting on it. And they go out there to put on a show. They don't go out to win, even though that's nice. So one of these days, the Siopa boys are going to bring Bash for Cash money home. And that's going to be good because they've been working for it for a long time.
My name's Preston Henshaw. I'm from Hermitage, Pennsylvania. My dad, Mike Henshaw, honestly, big role model of mine, builds a really great car. Bad Habit Promotions, you know, he was a derby promoter at the Stoneboro Fair. He just loves it. It's in our blood. And honestly, probably Chris Furster, because you know, that's my dad's best friend, and we just all grew up together. You know, we used to take the cars out to Chris's in the backyard and just do donuts and stuff, just have fun. So that's a pretty old memory right there. My main thing is I want to keep it safe. I want to keep it clean and put on a show. Put on a show for the crowd. Go out and hit hard.
So what's your number?
71X.
Why is that?
Because my dad's number is 711. So why not just take a 1 off and put an X?
how we want it to show up, and also we want you to focus on your driving. We do a secondary drivers meeting now at most of these events where you're present for the main drivers meeting for the promoter, and then we do a secondary meeting with the youth full size. This is where we tell you what our expectations of you as young drivers are, what can happen if you don't follow certain directions and abide by certain rules. So we're giving you the same accountability as anybody else that competes in this sport. We're just giving you your own arena to do it in, okay? And when we get to that game day, it's very beneficial because everybody that you get a chance to talk to in here has a lot of knowledge, okay? As much as it pains me to say it, you have some of the best drivers in Demolition Derby that are in this building right now. I'm not going to include myself in that, but I can tell you there are some guys here that are bad news when it comes to Demolition Derby. So talk to them, meet them, shake their hand, introduce yourself, and you'll get a wealth of knowledge. But going back to the Keystone Nationals, the winner of the youth program at the Keystone Nationals, we're building this car from the ground up. We're taking our time to do it. We're giving you our parts. Steve Siopa give us the frame. As you can notice, that's about as clean of a 9802 frame as you're going to get. We're going to come up with a body that's hopefully as clean as that to put on it. And the winner's going to get to have this car when they're done with it at the Fayette Championship. Anybody think that's a great idea?
I'm Jeff Sherman from Jeffy's Fab Farm, originally Canadian, now I live in Fredericksburg, Virginia. My earliest memory of Demolition Derby is 13 years old, Ancaster Fair, Ancaster, Ontario, Canada. Friend of mine, family friends, used to be involved in Demolition Derby. It was twin brothers, Pete and Dave Schwedick, and they used to paint their cars flip-flop of each other. So one did a Pepsi car, one did a Coke car. Sometimes they did half and half, one side Coke, one side Pepsi. So in the ring, you couldn't tell if it was Pete or if it was Dave. And they're a few years older than me, obviously. And me and my friend Cam got to load their cars that night, and we backed up and accidentally ran into each other, which is a pretty cool memory. And everybody came, and you're not supposed to hit the cars against each other in the pits, so that was cool. Turned 16, you hang out at the local county fair, which would be at Ancaster, Ontario, where I grew up in Canada, and hang out. You start crewing, hanging around with the guys and stuff like that. And when you become of age, it's no question you're getting in a car and you're running. That's just because that's what everybody did. And been running 26 years now, and now I fab full time, supplying parts to Derby customers all over the country.
Tell me about your Derby parts business.
Its inception was 2006. That was basically the first time I took money from a friend for a part that I had made. Being in Canada, the sport isn't as sought after, I guess, as it is in the States. Started to sell parts, travel a little bit, word of mouth. You know, this is long before the interweb, and started to migrate parts down into the States. Met a girl from the States through racing. 2010 we got together. I would travel all over the country, sell parts, and in 2017 we got married in 2010. 2017 I moved down to Virginia, put everything into my business, and have been doing it full time, 24/7, 365 since then. So we're talking 14 years that the Fab Farm's been around, and 3 years full time, and I hope to be doing it for the rest of my life.
Hi, I'm Hope Brent. I'm from Blairville, PA, and I'm driving a Lincoln Town Car at Keystone Nationals.
Jake Berger from Stoneboro, PA.
From Stoneboro, PA. Earliest Derby memory, probably sitting in my brother's Derby car at like 6 and driving around in the yard, and then going to watch him win and bash for cash.
Who's your brother?
Dane Clark, Anarchy car.
That's him right there.
Loudest car.
Yeah?
Ever see.
And do you Demolition Derby?
Yep.
Tell me about your Demolition Derby.
Number 1103, following after my dad, Randy, and I just go out there and have fun, supporting the most wanted paint job.
Chance Matheson.
I'm Chance Matheson from Jackson Center, PA. Age 16. I'm 927 after my dad. Jason Matheson, you might know him as Pork. Dad ran with Randi Brasil, Casey Smith, Chance Smith, and Dane Clark. Got stuck up on the barriers. He came around, lost brakes, and just got stuck up there. A story about my dad. We were out at Randi Brasil one day, chop shop. Jake Berkner here, sitting there smashing in
The hammer.
with the hammer in the trunk.
A lot of hours.
Sure is.
What do you remember about Pork?
Pork was he was always nice. He was like an uncle to me. He did everything and anything that he could do for me. And that's just, he felt like an uncle. And I miss him every day, all day, always thinking about him.
Yeah. My name is Mark Elliott from Eaton, Ohio. Been in the sport for at least 20 years, but many different areas of the sport, from driving to just a little bit of promoting, some inspecting, and now I am an announcer, and I get to travel the United States and do that, and I'm very blessed and fortunate, and I thank God for that. I have what's called the Unified Point Series, and that is 30 shows, and it's 17 promoters, it's 60 plus sponsors, and we're giving away $10,000 for first place prize. Couldn't have done any of it without my mom, Vicki Ash, who took me to my first Demolition Derby when I was 2 years old, and she never stopped taking me, and that instilled a love for the sport. I had an uncle that inspired me to actually drive a car, and from the first time that I did that, it was over. That's what I've loved to do my entire life, and the sport has helped me grow through my career and everything that I've accomplished.
What's happening? I'm Jason Druce from Oxford, Pennsylvania, and my oldest Derby memory was definitely mid-'80s, Cecil County Fair, all station wagon heat, and the one we were cheering for was the Orange Crush. Orange car, totally destroyed in the back, but this thing just kept going and won. It was awesome. Just messing with the old cars and bringing something back from the dead, putting a lot of time into putting it together and giving it one last hoorah. And, just imposing your will on another man. That's definitely the best part.
My name's Tim Clark. I'm the owner of Smash Demolition Derbies. My first event of Demolition Derbies is back in 1970 in my hometown show in Plain City, Ohio, where there's a bunch of old-time guys going out and really tearing up the cars really good. You know, it was mostly all round back wagons and some old Imperials.
You remember any names from back then?
Howard Yoder, Jeff Clark, Donnie Wampler was the big names back in them days.
Were you related to any of these guys?
The Jeff Clark was my oldest brother, yes.
So he's the one that got you started?
Yeah, he's the one that got me started in Demolition Derby.
Okay, my name's Frankie Guy. I'm from Uniontown, Pennsylvania. My oldest Derby car memory was 1985, Fayette County Fairgrounds, Dunbar, Pennsylvania, which we promote now at Hardcore. I won the feature the first time I ever entered the Demolition Derby. So I was hooked from the beginning.
Who do you remember from that Derby? Any names that you remember?
I do. Sturbutzels, Mr. Zeok, and all my friends cheering up in the stands from high school. So it's been a good deal. Great time today. Great things going on here at Smithmetalworx. If you're not here, you should have been here. Derby World is alive and well. So make sure you get on, especially our hardcore tour.
Everybody for opening up their house to let us gather here today. We got one person here that's locked out of his country. We ask that you keep everybody safe in their travels home. And we ask that you keep everybody safe in their travels throughout the 2020 Demolition Derby season. In your name we praise and we pray. Amen. We live in a land with freedom like no other. Here tonight for all you guys at SMW. Yeah! Everybody, I drove 4.5 hours. Ron McClung came from Canada. They did all that because they care about the sport that I love, that you all love, and they all came here for you.
I'm Lexie Druce, and I'm from Oxford, Pennsylvania. I grew up around the sport. It was something I was kind of born into, but when I was a teenager, probably 14 or 15, the first driver that really impressed me was probably Mike Klinger. I seen him at the Allentown Fair. I am the creator of the Demolition Derby Life magazine, which is a monthly publication that focuses solely on the sport. And I created it to basically just promote the drivers and give them the recognition that they aren't getting other places.
I'm Randi Brasil from Stoneboro, Pennsylvania. Grew up around Derby, and my dad and Elmer Smith, when I was a little kid, they derbied Stoneboro all the time. I was probably 4 years old when we started hanging out with the Elmers at Elmer's garage when they was building it. When we started going to school and stuff, we went to a different school. We went to Greenville, but Dad he grew up in Stoneboro, so he's always around it. He decided that the week of Stoneboro Derby was a holiday family tradition. You didn't have to go to school. You could just skip it to go to the Derby. He was only 5, 6 years old, but it was still a tradition that you didn't go to school that day. So we always skipped the first week of school pretty much and went to the Derby. And then ever since then, I've been hooked on it. Started derbying when I was 16. Haven't stopped since then.